Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. It has been a crazy week or so let me give you a quick little life update. So last week, we went as a family and with some friends to Milan to see some of the Winter Olympics. So we were able to see a hockey game of Czechia versus Switzerland, and it was so much fun. It was fun, a little family vacation, and it was short, so it was a quick little trip. And then we arrived back at home to have a bit of an insane week. So this last week in Catalonia, we have had some very, very strong winds. And it's to the point that school was canceled yesterday because the winds were so strong. And it's been honestly a little bit scary. There have been a lot of trees falling down. Our biggest thing though was our trampoline picked up and flipped down the driveway, so that was a little interesting. I think we'll be able to repair it, but it has just been crazy weather. And then today it is not so windy, but it is pouring rain. And to top it off, I had a cold all week. Everything's fine, my family's fine, I've been able to do some fun reading, so I'm excited to talk about that, and I've done a lot with my knitting. So I did finish the sweater for my husband, and if you have been following that journey, I did have to take apart the entire sweater that I had finished in the first place, and this is the second iteration, and it's fine. I think it's good. I'm just happy to be done. I'll put some pictures up. It's finished. It is done. I've done what I meant to do just in time for Valentine's Day, and I've started another project, of course. So my next little project is really just kind of a test project. I'm making a nice wide scarf because I wanted to try using this yarn. And so if you look at this, it's just so fluffy, and I don't even know what it's gonna be like. I don't know if I'm even gonna like it when it's done, but it's this silk alpaca yarn, and I keep seeing people making these beautiful projects with this held with other colors or these beautiful gauzy looking tops, and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna make a scarf and see how I like it. And so far, this is not a fun yarn to work with. It is a pain. It breaks. It cannot be unraveled. And I don't know if I'm so sold on the end product to think, yes, I need this in my life, but it's fun to try something new. So we'll see once I get through the scarf if I'm ever going to pick up another project with this kind of yarn or mohair again, because right now I'm like, why did I put myself through this? That is kind of my life update. I'm still a little stuffy. So today is just, you're getting what you're getting. I'm just gonna talk about the books the best that I can and hope I don't go into a coughing fit or anything. So let's jump into that. So this first book was a recommendation from, I think, Tiffany at Towering TBR, and this is Matchmaking for Psychopaths by Tasha Coriel. This book is following Alexandra, and she works as a matchmaker, but specifically she works for the part of the matchmaking agency that is for psychopaths. So she helps match up these psychopaths with other psychopaths so they can live their happily ever afters. And you follow her story as her fiance dumps her and she makes a new friend and some mysterious body parts start getting sent to her. And so this book is corny and over the top and filled with murder, and it is kind of fun. By the end you feel like, am I supposed to be rooting for the psychopaths, or am I supposed to be upset about this? And everything was very much wrapped up in a shiny, nice bow by the end, and I don't know how great that is, especially on maybe a moral level as I'm looking at it, but it's a very fun time. Now, a lot of the mystery and the reveal, I feel like just was obvious from a lot of this book. I didn't feel very surprised, which I feel like is a bit of a bummer, but it was a good time. It did keep me going through it. I just don't think it really managed to do anything all that surprising by the end, but at the same time, it's kind of what you would expect from this. Honestly, I'm kind of a little bit on the fence on this one, but if you like just kind of a murderous, fun time, corny kind of book, I think this was pretty good. It was a little bit frustrating to be stuck in Alexandra's head the whole time because as a character, she really has no real self-awareness, but you know what? I couldn't put it down anyways, so overall, pretty okay. So for a while now, I have been wanting to read some more from John Steinbeck, and I believe I asked Melinda what book to start with, and this is not the book she said, but it was what was available at my library, so I read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This book is tragic, this book is short, and it is packed full of meaning. This is following two laborers that look out for each other, and they are faced with a world that is so much more cruel and difficult than they would hope for, when all they really want is their own place to settle down and live in peace. And Lenny has some mental discapacities. And so we have George and Lenny and their story, and it is kind of awful to read. But there is so much symbolism that comes through, so much deep meaning in this. I really recommend it because it could lead to so much thought and discussion and introspection, and I thought it was really good. And for a short book and a book that I found to be kind of awful and miserable, I really think it was worth it because it's so short. You can deal with that for a little bit to get some of the themes and the discussion. So I thought this book was really excellent, but do I hate it at the same time? Yes. And do I think that it was necessarily fair in its treatment of the women in the book? Probably not. But I can see why this book has stuck around for so long, and I am very excited to get to more John Steinbeck, but oof, is it a bit of a heavy one. This next book I did as a buddy read with the amazing Tiffany at Towering TBR and Audrey from Audrey Approved. And we read Stoner by John Williams. And this book is following the life of William Stoner, who grew up on a farm, went to school to study agriculture, and fell in love with literature, and decided to become a professor and stayed there for the rest of his life. I thought the writing in this book was really well done. It kept me very engaged, which is kind of surprising, seeing as this book wasn't necessarily super dialogue, conversation heavy. It really described what happened over years in the chapters, but it still kept me going. And so I was impressed with the writing. I thought that the author did a good job at that. And the story itself was well told and all of that. I think where I end up landing on this book is that it was well written. It is a story that is worth being told. This absolute boring man who couldn't actually stand up for anything except for twice in this entire book, who never took accountability for his actions, who never really went out and fought for life to be the way that he needed it to be and that it should be, who was just so passive and frustrating. I think this was an interesting story and worth being told, but as a cautionary tale. I think that where this book really gets me is that the author doesn't look at it as a cautionary tale. I think this book is really excellent to read in a group because there is some really great discussion. You can look at William Stoner's life. You can try to understand, but I think the author isn't in on the meaning behind it. The author sees William Stoner as the hero of this story, the unlikely hero where things have just gone this way. And isn't this just a typical heroic everyday sort of life, where I see William Stoner as someone who has no passion for life, no drive, no yearning for something more. And it felt like instead of being able to recognize that, the author still just really loved the character too much. And so this book ends up being about 3 stars for me, if we're going on star ratings. It was okay. There was a lot to discuss with it. The writing was great. The story itself is interesting, but the takeaways you get from it and the way that the author tried to set up events to excuse a lot of Stoner's behavior, I think that the author loved the character more than the character necessarily deserved from the narrative. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was kind of meh for me. I did, of course, have a wonderful time discussing it in the buddy read, though. This last book is Black Woods, Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey. And this is a story about Birdie and her daughter, Emmeline. And Birdie falls in love with this man, Arthur, and ends up moving her and her daughter out to this cabin to be with him. And it is their story, both when they live there and later, as Emmeline revisits the places from her childhood. And this is such an interesting book because it's another one where I feel like the author didn't understand what the book was supposed to be. I feel like the author went into this thinking, this is a story of Beauty and the Beast. This is a beautiful story and it's a love story. And there's this fantasy, magical realism kind of feel throughout it. And you think, yes, it is that beautiful love story. And I think that's where the author really went with it, where I think the book was most successful if you really focused in on Emmeline's perspective and looked at it as the perspective of a child who has a parent who is being abused and is in a situation with domestic violence and how difficult coming to terms with a lot of that is. And I do think that there still was that element, and maybe it was intentional from the author, and I thought that it really was gonna kind of address that. I don't think she ever really stuck the landing on that. I feel like we had that moment and you thought, wow, what a really interesting metaphor for domestic abuse. And then you somehow get, maybe it was just actually a tragic love story all along. I'm a little torn on this just because it was a really interesting story, but I just don't know how successful it was because I'm not quite sure what themes the author was really wanting to go for with this book. And that is some of what I have read in the past little bit. I'm going to stop there. I have already read a couple other books, but this is enough for this video. I'll be back hopefully in a week or so if nothing crazy pops up and I can actually film a video next week. And if you have any thoughts on these books, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.